Barry Baltus, Joe Roberts, Yunis Saseki, Phillip all inside the top 14, which will certainly become crucial in this session. The big story, though, from this morning's free practice one session was your rider, 22nd place, World Championship leader, the increasingly under fire World Championship leader, Manu Gonzalez, who saw his advantage cut to just 9 points after his disqualification in Indonesia. He started his Australian Grand Prix weekend with a fast crash at the near 200 km/h pace shed of turn 8. Will Sotheby and Neil Morrison with you to talk you through this upcoming Moto2 practice session. And in recent times, Neil, we have seen championship contenders have to go through qualifying one. Aaron Canet, in the last 2 Grand Prix, has found himself in qualifying one. In fact, the last 3, it's 2, he was unsuccessful in making it through. Well, it's Manu Gonzalez, the points leader, who's on his back foot coming into Friday afternoon.
Certainly is. Great to see a lot of school children coming here. What a fantastic day out that would be. Still early potentially to come and watch some Grand Prix motorcycles along arguably the world's best circuit. Still be riding this. The big question mark will be the championship leader in this session. Just how can he recover from that terrifying 120-mile-an-hour crash down at the hay shed? The team are insistent that he is a-okay. No physical problems after that fast crash, thankfully. But I have to imagine his confidence will have taken a little bit of a hit after that one. It would be impossible for that not to be the case. And Gonzalez, big 40 minutes coming up in this practice.
He only did 4 laps this morning in the end of Manu Gonzalez before crashing on his fit. So he's perhaps a little bit short of mileage to coming into this session. Perhaps the saving grace for Manu is that it wasn't exactly a true conventional dry session. Grand Prix races of the future there. Away through the temporary inflatable racetrack on the other side of the main straight from the pits and paddock. Alach on the slightly less happy side of the RBDS morning. He did end the morning in 14th place on a 1:32.6, 1.3 seconds though slower than his teammate Jake Dixon, who did lead the way, although it's rather difficult to draw any firm conclusions from the session we saw, given the first half or the first third of it was in very iffy condition.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Jake Dixon was only half a second off Aaron Canet's all-time lap record. We feel that if we get decent conditions this afternoon and then tomorrow, the big if, of course, for Phillip Island, you imagine that that lap record will fall and then some. Yeah, maybe we will be throwing out the FP1 times fairly quickly. Here is the crash that we were talking about earlier today as he pitches in to the right through the hay shed, maybe just ever so slightly offline was Gonzalez, and then at this point here, a little bit of a knock to the head. You can see how it rolls through the gravel, and good to see him immediately moving and putting up his visor there. And I've said many times this year, Manu Gonzalez is unflappable. Very little will cause him to lose, or will take a big occasion to lose his head. You can see there, but regained his composure, is ready to go again.
He's through the unflappable. He's given himself the best opportunity to prove that this afternoon. He can secure a place in qualifying 2. The customary 3-session ritual and preparation for Danny Holgado. In there with his finger there, just plotting his way around the racetrack, reminding himself of which gears he needs to be in through each corner. Several 4th gear corners around this Phillip Island circuit on a Moto2 bike. 5 of them in total. Nick Dixon, who was the fastest of them all earlier on today. Even someone from Dover in the south of England is feeling this a tad chilly.
Absolutely. Even someone from Northern Ireland is feeling a chilly current location. A decent morning from Dixon, obviously the fastest time. Really good morning as well from Senna Aegis, who hit the ground running in FP1. 4th fastest time for the home hero. He was just immediately in the groove, wasn't he? At a point where he was, I think, around half a second faster than everyone else before flurry of late lap times came in. This showed that he is absolutely up for his home Grand Prix, looking to at least replicate the feats of 1 year ago.
Aaron Canet to go one better than not just last year, but the year before that too. 2nd place. Last 2 visits to Phillip Island. 21 second places he's had now in his Moto2 career to go with the 5 victories. feel he's going to have to add to that in the 4 rounds that remain if Canet's going to win this Moto2 Championship, although his chances are still at least alive. The disqualification of Manu Gonzalez. Indonesia, for Lopez, one half of an expensive morning session for the Speed RS team earlier on today that has won in 2 of the last 3 years here. Lopez the first to go down. He went down coming out of Siberia before late in the session Celestino Vietti went down into Miller Corner, turn 4. Result of that, both of them ended the morning outside the top 15.
Yeah, 18th for Vietti, 27th for Alonso Lopez. That is quite the contrast to Lopez's previous visits here at Speed RS team. We feel that based on recent form, it is probably best for all parties if Lopez moves away. Maybe a change of scenery will do him good. He's obviously moving across to replace the rider we just saw on our screens. Will be lining up on a Calyx next year in the Grassini team. The of local fans coming through Transtal's today. This, well, we thought it was going to be a weather impacted day of practice, but it's actually turned out to be quite positive than we could have imagined around 8 or 9 a.m. this morning.
Yeah.
So, different faces of Marc Marquez each time he's won a MotoGP World Championship.
They found space for the 9th picture on there, couldn't quite make it out. Sadly, Marc Marquez not a part of this Australian Grand Prix after the injury sustained in Indonesia, but he does have so many fans here in the Phillip Island, a venue which had so much success, most recently in 2024. A brief glimpse there of Adrian Huertas coming to a circuit that he does have some prior experience of. Huertas' pole position he took here last year at the start of the World Supersport season, a season that he of course ended as the champion. Say that he's to revise his expectations in his rookie Moto2 season. He does deserve credit and praise for his performance when he came through to 10th place at the flag in Indonesia with some very impressive late race pace.
And a few signs that Huertas is gradually coming to terms with this Moto2 Championship. Winning in World Supersport is one thing, but Moto2 is a whole different bearpit. You have a kind of level of depth in this class that maybe isn't quite as apparent in World Supersport. And Huertas, his weekend in Hungary, that was a big positive. As I said, really strong comeback in Indonesia. A few little signs in this second half of the season that he's coming to terms with. Hopefully, see a more rounded rider and challenger next year's Moto2 Championship. He'll be lining up alongside Annie Munoz, who has earned himself a full-time spot on next year's grid. We focus in on the championship leader. I feel we'll be doing a lot of that throughout this afternoon's 40-minute session. Alex will have the cameras trained on him. This is really one of those sessions that you're going to have to deal with when you're fighting for a championship. You have to stand up, you have to show that you can shrug off big pressure moments, and certainly the session you feel is going to be one of those.
For keeping it on the road and not making any mistakes that are going to take you out of the session, but take yourself out of qualifying too. It's largely where Aaron Canet has tripped up in recent rounds, crashed in the last 2 Friday practice sessions, which put him into qualifying 1 as we take a look at a rider who took back-to-back Moto2 victories here at Phillip Island, 2012 and 2013, of course having already clinched the Moto2 World Championship. That 2012 today, Marc Marquez won the title when Volkswagen won by a country mile.
Yeah, one of the biggest ever by winning margins in the Moto2 class. It's going to go back to what 2012, it was 15 seconds or somewhere along. I didn't check the exact numbers, but it was an absolute cakewalk. Spargaro, he was looking a little bit down in the dumps there. I think he was actually on holiday prior to coming out to Australia. So
yeah, bags under those Spanish eyes for Paul, I'm afraid.
Yeah, jet lag, understandably so. And coming to terms with possibly one of the most ferocious tracks in scary conditions that you have to face when you're a replacement rider. MotoGP FP1 earlier. Good job as well.
2012 victory from Paul Spargaro was ahead of an Aussie, of course. was Anthony West, who podium finish on that afternoon as Marc Marquez clinched his championship across all classes, of which he's since added a further 7, all of them in MotoGP. Underway then, 40 minutes coming up. If you're not familiar with the format, we'll bring you quickly up to speed. The top 14 at the end of this practice session will move forward through the qualifying.
Was performances here in Moto2 class in years gone by. Lewis obviously mentioned Paul Espargaro's 2012 triumph. Also add Alonso Lopez's 2022 victory in Moto2 here. We've had the real cracker, which he won, I think, beaten Franco Morbidelli coming out of the final turn on the run to the line.
Well, Alex De Angelis and Stefan Bradl too, the eventual Moto2 champion in 2011, having a bit of a ding-dong here too, as the yellow flags have already come out, coming through Nuki Heights and dropping down towards MG. It's not Diogo Moreira who's brought them out, so watching him come across the line. Best time we saw this morning is a 1:31.346. Moreira's 3/10 drift of that is Danny Holgado, who is hobbling away from the scene of a crash, which, given the terrain.
Oh, mid-corner. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was a high side, but you can see the Spaniard limping away there. Understandable if we have some concerned faces on Martinez Aspar.
A little bit of assistance there for the marshals to leave the scene. But clearly a painful landing for Holgado, which does indicate that it perhaps wasn't just a conventional front-end washout for Holgado, which was what his crash looked like back in Indonesia, but he had a very good excuse for his fall.
Yeah, if we can add Danny Holgado to the
and video evidence to back it up.
The tear-off club, yeah. So it also includes Pecco Bagnaia, Dennis Foggia as well. Yeah. So Danny was...
Holgado brought the receipts though, didn't he? Posted on his social media channels the video, because you can, in fairness to Holgado, see the tear off under his front tyre.
Yeah, yeah. All the ways to crash. All the misfortune that you can face in a Grand Prix race. I think running over a tear-off and that causing you to lose adhesion really is top of the billing. Some serious doubts over the validity of Dennis Foggia. I think it was a Mugello one year coming through.
From the lead.
Yeah, from the lead, wasn't he? High-sided out coming through to Casanova Sabelli. Yeah. And Bagnaia, a few people would cast aspersions on his claim back in 2020, wasn't it, when he crashed out of Misano coming through turn number 6.
Same circuit, same year, where we did see errant tear off from Jack Miller take out. There's a Fabio Quartararo on that particular occasion. Senna Regis, though, getting on with his job and doing a pretty good job of it too, as David Alonso goes quicker than that. I was about to check whether Senna Regis has had an all-time lap record. Well, David Alonso certainly has. 1:30.535 is the fastest ever Moto2 lap of Phillip.
Yeah, amazing stuff for Alonso, who was right in the zone earlier today. Second fastest, just behind Jake Dixon. He's come on swinging in this session as well. Brilliant stuff then from the number 80. Did mention this morning that I think lap record could potentially fall into the 1:29s. That's because obviously everything got a bit faster when Pirelli came in as the sole tyre supplier on Moto2 last year. But last year was such a weather-afflicted weekend that we only really had 1 or 2 sessions where conditions were fairly ideal to post properly fast times. When I say fairly ideal, I do mean still with high levels of wind buffeting the riders around. So interesting that lap record in Moto2 was set in last year's race as opposed to qualifying, but new lap records belongs to David Alonso in this practice session, and don't expect it to stay that way for long. Senna Aegis is maybe going to try and rewrite that in a couple of minutes' time.
He goes. He hasn't actually triggered the timing beam yet as Aegis, so eagerly anticipating with all of you what kind of lap time he sets on perhaps the issues, or we're just waiting. Here he is coming out of the final corner. It was an Aegis that we saw crossing the line a moment ago. Here comes the 81. Getting ever close to the 29s. Adrius goes to second place. He cuts the gap to Alonso now, down to just a 10.5. Canet third from Arbolino, Moreira and Dixon. Keep an eye on the World Championship leaders' progress. Manu Gonzalez getting his session underway. He's 10th spot.
Yeah, I was just about to point out a very steady start, you would say, for Manu Gonzalez in this practice session. You might be saying 10th isn't really much to shout about, but after what happened this morning, for him to be that high up, I was expecting a bit of a slower start from him, I have to say. So good stuff from Gonzalez, showing that he is keeping his head as it stands. Still plenty of running to do in this session with 30 minutes to go. Sasaki looks as though he's going to jump up. Fast lap time coming in for Canet and Arbolino on their current laps as well.
Other riders who've had bright starts to the session. Darren Binder up in 7th place for the Cassini squad on a 1:31.2, and Mario Aggi right behind him in 8th. Aggi was in the top 10 this morning on the Honda Team Asia machine, although, as mentioned, it was a slightly iffy mixed session. He was one of the first riders to slicks, but Aggi at the moment, we've really seen the best of since the shoulder surgery, which was, of course, required as a result of several dislocations of that shoulder for the Indonesian earlier in the season. You can see signs of Aggi returning to form once again, because he was a regular Q2 challenger pre-injury.
Yeah, back to the form that he was shown prior to that long enforced injury absence. It come at the worst possible time after, well, not long after he had scored the best result for an Indonesian rider in the history of Grand Prix racing, 9th place in round number 3 in Austin, so many moons ago now it feels. As we see Jake Dixon jumping up into 6th. Yeah, you'd have to imagine there's a bit more to come from Jake. He's obviously gone faster in his FP1 time effort by the tune of 0.2 of a second. The problem is that David Alonso has gone 9/10 faster, and that was what, on Alonso's 3rd flying lap of the session. Took close to a second off his previous best from FP1, so really impressive stuff from the rookie.
A bit of a mixed start to the session then for the Aspar team. There's Dani Holgado, of course, with his fall. He's in a bit of trouble at the moment. Holgado with no lap time next to his name, as I sort of glance down the timing screens to try and find him. So as things stand, it looks unlikely that we're going to see Holgado in this session again. The 96, or previously the 96, now the 27 in his Moto2 days. Of course, with Jake Dixon having first dibs on that number. Holgado at the moment on course for qualifying 1, which down at the old commentary notes would be the first time we've seen Holgado in Q1 since Brno.
That's a testament to just how brilliant Holgado has been in this middle part of the season. No, he has been a leading contender in pretty much most of the races that we've had. Massive, and arguably is much more heralded teammate David Alonso, who might be a bit of an exception after that big crash up at Lucky Heights. And the yellow flag's out in sector number 2. The man side of our commentary box is Marcos Ramirez has had a fall. Too sure.
He's up at Siberia, up at third 6, where we can see some yellow lights flashing and some marshals rushing into activity as Captain Andalucia. I haven't given him, he's given himself, you can see it written on his leathers. It's gone down. Coming through turn 6, we saw Lopez go down coming out of this corner earlier on today. Ramirez on the way in.
Bike is absolutely totaled, isn't it, as it slides
towards the fat straight.
Towards the barriers there. You can see and Buchwald just in the background there. That is the team proprietor. Slightly anguished at the crash of Ramirez. His drop in form last couple of races has been really quite pronounced. Going back some time, his last top 10, 7 races now since he has been in the top 10, and after a pretty strong start to the year, Ramirez has just started to slide into obscurity somewhat in Moto2.
Okay, 4th Q1 appearance out of the last 5 for Ramirez. Q2 appearance that he's had at that time was a very good one. Qualified 6th in Indonesia. Has to go the long way around if he's going to achieve that here this weekend. Goldberg has been on an adventure or two early on in this session too, and Goldberg currently in P13. Pretty much the long way around the southern loop.
Better that route than flying through the gravel. So Goldberg manages to live for another challenge. Comes back into pit lane. A couple of other improvements. See there, Manu Gonzalez has just gone slightly faster. Still in 10th position. Good stuff start of the session from Colin Bayer, who sits up in 7th, so good performance from the Dutchman so far. I guess good recovery from Manu Gonzalez to be 10th, but we need to start building on that now, I guess, with Aaron Canet in 4th, Diogo Moreira in 5th. In the early signs that we've seen so far, Lewis, today, yeah, those two championship challengers are going to be right in the hunt when we go racing on Sunday.
As we've seen on many occasions, we see a second crash for Celestino Vietti of the day. He's also up at Siberia, so no sooner have they cleared the yellows due to Ramirez's crash, Celestino Vietti has given the marshals some more work down there, and that has not been a particularly successful corner for Speed RS today.
He hasn't. It's as though it might be a little precarious down at Siberia, and you could see there with Celestino's hand movements, it was just like, what happened there? Really unable to explain what was going on. It's been a pretty ropey run for the young Italian since we left Europe. It was home Grand Prix. Zano, and he was just absolutely untouchable. No one could get close to him in that race just 3 rounds ago. First and only win of the season so far, and well, Phillip Island unfortunately has been following kind of recent script that he's had here in years gone by, where he's not been withdrawn through injury, he's been blown off the track through heavy winds like we saw in 2023, or crashing out in 2022 I think it was as well, when his title challenge was completely falling apart. Yeah, it's one of those spells where things don't really seem to be clicking for the number 13, unfortunately.
Add him to what is already looking like a pretty illustrious list. They're going to be going through qualifying 1 tomorrow, barring miraculous repairing of motorcycles, which surely isn't going to happen. We're going to be seeing Celestino Vietti, Daniel Holgado and Marcos Ramirez all in qualifying 1 tomorrow. 2 riders in the top 7 in the World Championship, and Marcos Ramirez was in the top 10 in the World Championship for much of the first part of the season. He has been pulled back down the stands a little bit with the recent improvements of the likes of David Alonso and Ethan Guevara, who've both gone up ahead of him in the championship standings. It's Regis now here on screen, who has been strong through the first 3 sectors. Clearly he hasn't been able to match Alonso through the 4th sector so far. It would appear that was where Alonso was doing a lot of his good work on his way to that 1:30.535. Let's see though, with a bit of slipstream up ahead of him from the Grassini bike of Darren Binder, whether Aegis can succeed this time. Across the line he goes. It's a 36.05, so he still remains in 2nd place.
Yeah, that was with the slipstream. So David Alonso in the final sector, I think we can glean from that he is pretty exceptional. You can see most of the riders losing time through Alonso. Very fast in sectors 1 and 2, but when it goes slightly awry. Dick Dixon, not the same. He's had a good session so far, but still lacking something compared to the top riders. In fact, Alonso and Aegis are in a bit of a class of their own as it stands. Tony Arbolino in 3rd is more than 3/10 of a second off.
Not turning well at the end of that from Manu Gonzalez.
Yeah, from halfway through the curve, from halfway through the corner, it's not turning, and also take a Spanish expert to be able to understand mucho movimiento.
Yes.
That's a lot of movement.
At the front, I think he's
on the front, yeah, exactly. So Gonzalez not feeling ideal out there, and I guess we do have to really take into account that this is essentially his FP1, isn't it? After he sat out first 15 minutes of FP1 because the track was still drying, and when he did go on, I think it was only 3 or 4 laps in, and he had that huge crash. 4 laps it was, down at the hay shed. So playing a bit of catch up, a little bit like Dixon was in Indonesia when he had 2 crashes in the first practice session, and that really put him on the back foot. Would we be too early to be talking about damage limitation here, Lewis?
A little, but I think with the relative performances of Canet Moreira, Gonzalez knows that he can't just rely on his 2 chief title rivals dropping the ball and letting him off the hook. Gonzalez is going to have to, as we said this morning, go on the attack now in this Moto2 World Championship. He's been in a situation in recent rounds where taking 3rds, 4ths, 5ths and 6th has been enough to keep that World Championship lead at around the sort of 20 to 30 points mark. He got disqualified from the Indonesian Grand Prix. That safety net was removed from below Anu's feet. Confirmation of Daniel Holgado's trip to the medical centre. His bike is now back in the box. Let's get to work in the potential possibility their rider is fit to return to the session later on.
So that bike is close to being good to go. Just need the rider to with his checkup. Currently in the medical centre, we saw him limping away. It looked as though he'd maybe aggravated or hurt potentially his right leg, the way he was limping. So let's see. We have confirmation of that. Herrera, another rider, having a good session here. See how he weighs up against David Alonso in that final sector. Those two long left-handers through turns 11 and 12, and you can see Herrera losing, what, 0.3 of a second at least through Alonso. So I'm not exactly sure what the reigning Moto3 champion is doing through there, but it is serving him well in this practice session so far.
Doesn't appear to be top speed for Alonso. Through the speed traps, he was 12th on the rankings. In fact, ages when he had that slipstream up behind Binder was the best part of 5 kilometers an hour quicker through the speed traps, which is just past the finish line, halfway down towards turn 1. And Alonso, historically very fearsome and strong heavy braker. Potentially it's through that downhill plunge into MG turn 10 where Alonso is making so much of a difference at the moment in that final sector, to the tune of, well, a good 10th or so over Aegis, and as you said, 3/10 to Herrera.
One thing that does look pretty decent in Senna's favour is the fact that he's lapping fairly consistently in the 138s, 139s, which will be a very competitive race pace indeed. You can see once again he's absolutely right on it, on the limit, coming through sector 2 and sector 3. Takes 1.5 tenths through sector number 3.
And another slipstream up ahead of him. This time it's Dani Munoz, who is perhaps a little bit further ahead than Binder was on the previous lap. As you can see, a little bit of a bump on the midway through that final corner. Just so it catches your attention, you've got to give this circuit its full respect. And Senna Aegis is certainly doing that. Plus the line he goes, and once again he loses that advantage. Perhaps a little bit of wheelie out of that final corner. Aegis stays in second once more.
Yeah, very promising lap once again. This is a decent bit into a longer run, I think. We haven't seen Aegis pit, have we, in this session?
He's looking at genuine podium threat at the very least at this stage of the weekend for Senna Aegis. Podium, of course, is where he finished 1 year ago. He arrives back home to Australia as a Moto2 winner after that incredibly dramatic close to the British Grand Prix back in May. And Aegis certainly giving the many Aussie fans here at Phillip Island plenty of encouragement.
He is with this run that he's on here. It's looking pretty decent, as opposed to Gonzalez, who's still trying to iron out a few things with his bike setting. This is Gonzalez come in on a Friday morning, Friday afternoon. This is when he, in recent weekends, has looked class apart from the rest of the field, but hasn't quite made it happen. Translated that into a top result on Sunday. David Alonso was going to have a little sneak through, and Darren Binder there coming up to Lucky Heights. But that might be a bit too much on the limit, but also here looking very aggressive on into the MG hairpin. There's no doubt that sure the last month or two will have really stung the Moto3 World Champion. It's not just been that it has been the best rookie, it's not even been the best rider in that Aspar team, and frankly speaking, there wouldn't be too many riders or too many pundits even out there that would have thought we'd be saying that at this point of 2025, especially this time 1 year ago.
So left the Indonesian Grand Prix with a serious bottom lip and a rather bandaged top lip after the face planting he received in Indonesia, but he was in that battle for the podium positions, or just slightly outside the podium positions. Also, say pretty much every weekend at this stage of the season, returns to a place where he won in Moto3 last year. I know that doesn't narrow it down too much because he won 14 times in Moto3 last year, but this Australian Grand Prix was one of them for the baby goat. He used to lead the way. His outright fastest lap time, certainly the best of the lot, but Aegis' long run there, as you can see, a whole host of mid to high 130s.
Yeah, and that's going to be really formidable rhythm, I think, on Sunday when we do go racing in the zone. Yeah, we will be able to analyse a fuller assessment of who is where when we go through times, the lap-by-lap analysis, which will come out after this session, but I'd be more than willing to bet Neji has probably been strongest in terms of rhythm so far from what we've seen. The likes of Canet, Alonso, Moreira all look fairly strong, but not quite showing that level of consistency in the mid to high 130s.
Pirelli, understandably, are more conservative than they would at certain other venues on the calendar. We have seen the super soft, the X rear tyre on certain occasions this season. No signs of that here for very obvious reasons. They've introduced this weekend, they've reintroduced, shall we say, the SC3, the extra hard rear tyre option, in addition to development medium rear tyre, which we did see back at Sachsenring earlier on in the season, both with the very unique demands of this Phillip Island circuit, which is quite abrasive, as well as the high-speed nature, which does put an awful lot of load and stress through both front and rear tyre.
Well, Pirelli have had a couple of challenges here when we've come for World Superbike in the last couple of years. Know all about the challenges off this circuit, but not quite the same load, same forces being put through the rear tyre with these Moto2 machines as opposed to full 1000cc superbikes. That means it's slightly less of a challenge here. We didn't see too many dramas, or in fact any dramas, I think, with tyres in the Moto2 race last year here, Pirelli's first year. One or two might have predicted at the time that it could be a bit of a challenge, but we are running more or less the same specs as we have in World Superbike in Moto2, and the same forces aren't being put through the rear tyre means that it's a slightly easier ride. There is a happy sight for the Aspar team. Delgado's back. Time set. On his first flying lap when he had that crash then.
Here it is, or you're going to see the tail end of it. Bike, given that it arrived into picture, it's in completely the wrong direction. Nardo losing it just as he tipped over that crest of Lukey Heights. He dropped downhill once again into NG. Unfortunately, never made it that far. Did the 27. He was determined not to make the same mistake again that he made in Indonesia, even if it was slightly down to some freaky circumstances with a tear up under his front tyre. It's a bit of an unnecessary burden of pressure in these final 15 minutes, assuming that his motorcycle is ready to go, which certainly looked close to when we last saw it. Nardo beginning once again his practice session with only 15 minutes left on the clock, and already he's battling for a place in QT.
So we have some scenic shots then of the riders coming through turn number 4, Miller corner. Corner or Miller bend?
Those will do.
Yeah. Those will do as long as Miller's in the title. See in the last lap that Manu was losing on 5/10 of a second in sector number 4. Understandable if maybe just slightly apprehensive before giving it absolute berries in some of the faster corners that we have here. In turn 12, last turn on this track, certainly is one of those. I seem very interested in looking on what his championship rival is doing.
Paul Gonzalez, they're just getting out of the way of Alex's Screech. As we rejoin the action, Screech losing all of this morning's session due to a mechanical problem on his forward bike. He set no time earlier on today. The Screech has just gone up into second place. We'll check on Harrison Boyd too. He's returned to Moto2 action this weekend for the QJ Motorfrinza MSI squad. He's in for the injured Unai Radre. Boyd to the moment 27th place on a 1:33.1.
Happy session, not been a happy day for Celestino Vietti, who crashes the first at turn 4, second down at Siberia. See whether he manages to get out in the final 10 minutes of this session. Bit of a wild ride for Ethan Guevara through this final sector, you can see. All sorts of movements. Understandable then that he's lost a significant amount of time. Just going back to Harrison Boyd, managed to catch up with him just after FP1 for the lunch break. Had a really tricky year in the European Moto2 Championship this season. Feels that the speed's been there, the results haven't quite been up to what he was expecting prior this season. But he did have a 4th place last time on, and feels that he can approach these 2 races here in Australia and then Malaysia next week. He really feels that will be a valuable experience that he can carry in to the final couple of rounds of the European Moto2 Championship. It's no secret Harrison would like to be in this World Championship in the next year or two. He's have full benefit of working with last year's Moto2 champions crew chief in the MSI squad, Norman Rank, like Harrison's side. That's what Norman has been working with this year.
Sergio Garcia, we've had Oscar Gutierrez, Unai Radre, Harrison Hoyt now is the 4th of them. That's been a bit of missing. He's also been part of that team. Well, the name will come to us. Eric Fernandez, of course, who was also part of that team very early in the year. No real continuity within that box. Of course, you'd expect a little bit more continuity for Norman Rankin Cup in the next season, when expect he'll be the crew chief of the upcoming Moto2 rookie Anka Piqueras.
Norman is still very much involved with Aigura in MotoGP, and find a lot of Japanese fan videos appearing on social media. Norman basically giving Aigura some very enthusiastic signals during the sprint, telling them to get a bit of a move on. So, although they're not necessarily working in the same team anymore, I think Norman is almost the kind of
hype man.
A hype man that, stands and gives him still some little motivational talks from the sidelines.
I think any motivation is needed for this man at the moment. Then at Agius, I think we'll be having a good look at the data to try and work out what he's lacking relative to David Alonso in that final sector. This is where the final sector begins, towards turn 10. Down to 20 kilometers an hour, one of the 2 first gear hairpins on this Phillip Island circuit, the other Miller Corner, turn 4. So much of this circuit is upwards of 3rd gear, or through the fearsome first corner, Doohan curve. 4th gear as you go through Stoner Corner, turn 3, through turn 7 and 8, of course, up through the hay shed. Requires plenty of commitment as this Phillip Island circuit, something that Ethan Guevara here lacks. He's trying to safeguard a place for him inside the top 14. 14th is currently where he sits. Cruise no further on that last lap. Didn't get a chance really to cover Guevara's Indonesian showing this morning, so while there's a little bit of order scenes, we have a chance to talk about it now. The best Sunday showing for sure of Guevara's Moto2 career, and it was particularly impressive for Guevara, of course. We so often see him start well, so he qualified up on the front row of the grid. That gave him the springboard to then lead in the early stages, but once the, I guess, relatively inevitable of Moreira and Gonzalez coming through on Guevara, did a very good and mature job of just managing that gap to the Connect-led group behind it.
Yeah, there's crackers so far this year, but that was pretty much because Diogo Moreira was holding the tune from the front. No one could get close to him. Even championship leader Manu Gonzalez, and as you said, Guevara was nice and comfy there in 3rd. Eventually it became 2nd. He said afterwards, just the fact that he had qualified on the front row for the first time this year, it's made a whole world of difference, and that is obviously one of the keys in this Moto2 class. You're not trying to do too much too soon. Guevara has been something of a specialist, hasn't he, in this second part of the year of gaining positions in races. And he was starting from the front row, meant that it was already done by the time the race start kicked around.
It will be the fastest starter in Moto2. So often we see him win places on the first lap or up to the first corner, so it doesn't come as much of a surprise from 3rd on the grid that he led through turn 1. Well, surely this time with a over quarter of a second advantage, Aegis is going to hold this through the final quarter, and with the benefit one would expect of some fresh Pirelli tyres on that Intact GP Alex, the Aussie might be about to take not only top spot but the all-time lap record here in Phillip Island. Across the line he goes, and he misses out by 0.02 of a second. That 3/10 advantage, not quite enough.
Not quite enough, yeah. But Aegis, yeah, again, in the mid 1 minute 30s, and just so confident and so strong. Great to see Aegis looking completely at one with his bike on his home circuit. He's absolutely in the zone. No jinx him, but That's perfectly the plan. But number 81 has this Friday so far.
So are they close now to completing the repair job? Yeah, get the bike out of the box, they're saying. And that spot somewhere in the back of that. Shadows will be Danny Holgado ready to get up and running. 7 minutes remain. So even if he leaves the pit lane now, Holgado, we're talking of maybe 3-4 time laps that he's going to be dealing with at the very most in this session that remains. So a lot of pressure on the shoulders of Holgado at the moment, who could be crowned the Rookie of the Year in Moto2 this weekend if results go his way.
Going to be a big old ass though, isn't it? For Danny, look at this from Agius. Again, absolutely nailing the first 3 sectors of the lap. He's now 4/10 clear of David Alonso on this particular effort. Surely you have to say this will be enough for him to gain top spot and to set new all-time Moto2 lap records at this Phillip Island circuit. That looked pretty clean coming out of turn 12 for me, from what I could see. And Agius comes across the line, does indeed go fastest with a 30.3. Goodness me, we are seeing the lap record being completely torn up. A second faster now than last year's previous best.
We're going to see 29s tomorrow if we have a clean, dry Super Saturday. Qualifying to come, of course, tomorrow afternoon in Moto2. But this is the session where Q2 places are decided, which hasn't really left Danny Holgado much room for manoeuvre down there, still without a lap time to his name, and essentially a 6-minute practice session for him coming up. Here comes Fuertes on the second of the Italtrans bikes. He goes up into 8th place now as Via takes 6th spot, just behind the other Italtrans Calix of Diogo Moreira.
A good performance from Veyer in this session. Manny Gonzalez getting held up maybe through the final turn from Harrison Bourne just up ahead. He will have a little bit of the Australian slipstream as he comes across the line. 9th place for the championship leader, 31.0. Not so bad. 3/10 faster than the quickest time this morning, but we have seen times lowered by a second now from what we saw in FP1. So Gonzalez now clear track up ahead. Maybe this will be an easier chance for him to set a faster time.
I wouldn't describe that as guaranteed safety for Manu Gonzalez. 1:31.062. Cola, who's just outside the Q2 place, is 15th on a 31.4 at the moment. Alonso Lopez going to 20th place, looking to salvage something for the Speed RS team this afternoon. But of course, the issues of Celestino Vietti, a crash in either session. If you're just joining us, Vietti down in 24th place, and we are unlikely to see much from him in the minutes that remain. Diogo Moreira, though, well, he is certainly calling the shots here, looking to try and pile further pressure on Manu Gonzalez. Aegis' advantage is a couple of tenths of a second. No one else within half a second of the Aussie at the moment, with Arbolino, Canet, Moreira and Via all on high 130s, completing the top 6. Moreira surely is about to close that gap here as the MotoGP bound Brazilian makes his way to the line, and he does go up into second spot. Actually, just behind him has just taken 4th place.
Impressive stuff again from the Indonesian. Jake Dixon climbs up a couple of places into 4th. So decent stuff from Dixon. That means we now have Bosco Skurros in 4th and 6th. And look at that from Manu Gonzalez, 5th place. You have to say this has been a really steady session from the Spaniards. Once again, just showing that he is cool as ice, as cold as the winds that we've had here so far today. But really impressive stuff. And he's now a couple of places ahead of Aaron Canet.
Chipped away at it, hasn't he? Just kept his head, and it looks like he's going to be rewarded with a place in qualifying 2. Who are the riders perhaps coming under a little bit of pressure here? Baltus, who's 4th in the World Championship, 43 points off the lead. He's now back to 13th place and not looking particularly safe either. Lopez, who are watching the 2022 winner, still down in the low reaches of P20.
And Harrison Boyd has unfortunately had a bit of a crash.
And a bike on the very right-hand side of the racetrack there, coming out of turn 1.
Yeah, there is a yellow flag in sector 1, so it could be a strange crash, and I think you might be right there, Lewis. Yeah.
Bizarre place to find a motorcycle, so I don't know whether he's lost it coming out of turn 1. Unusual, so hopefully Harrison Boyd is okay after that. The place you normally find a motorcycle. So Ricardo, understandably, a little bit cautiously on this first lap. What push in these minutes that remain. He'll get 2 more laps out of this when he comes across the line now. This is going to be his first on the board. 27, currently the slowest of our 28 that have gone out on the racetrack in this Moto2 practice session. following up the line. This is going to move into the top 14. It's just a building lap here for Holgado. 26th place and 2 seconds back.
So let's see if he can build on that from here as he comes round through turn 1. Improvements also coming in for Yumu Sasaki, who's gone inside the top 14. 11th. Barry Baltas has gone 10th. Danny Munoz up into 9th. So this is Munoz's first trip to Phillip Island.
It is,
yeah. So decent stuff from Danny on his first day here. See Herrera, well, he's locked in just behind Jake Dixon for this late attack, and it's serving him pretty well as he comes through the hay shed, nice and clean and well within the track limits is Diogo. You can safely say that Oscar's previous advantage at this circuit, Lewis, has been eradicated. We're obviously seeing Dixon very competitive, but by no means at the levels which we saw in previous years.
Yeah, Tony Arbolino's performing perhaps above his normal level on his score in 8th place, but outside of that, we've got Ivan Artola 14th, we've got Ethan Guevara down in 19th, and of course we've covered the issues of Speed RS, Lopez and Vietti outside the top 20, so Luca Boscoscoro, who normally considers this the home banker in Moto2 terms, is not proving that at the moment, as Diogo Moreira now regains top spot. The championship chaser takes top spot 30.307, 8 thousandths between Moreira and Agius.
Yeah, I think he'll owes Jake Dixon maybe a cold Carlton this evening after getting that slipstream out of the final turn. You can see Darren Binder was, I think, pretty happy with that lap as he came across the line, down into turn 1, the nod of the head as he jumps up into 13th. This has been the best session we've seen from Darren Binder in Moto2 for quite some time.
I've seen him in qualifying 2 since Qatar back in April, so Binder at the moment on course to change that. The big threat might come from Holgado, who is now on his final flying lap. On a personal best though through the first sector. Can Guevara rescue his Friday? He does. Goes up into 12th place, which now puts Binder on the bubble in 14th place.
Yellow flags out again at sector number 2, and it is, I think that's Manu Gonzalez,
isn't it? Outside our commentary box window, the World Championship leader down for the 2nd time today.
Yeah, just after, or a little while after that brilliant time which put him up into 5th position, Gonzalez looks as though, oh, he will have ended his session early with a second fall of the day. Go back and check the crash stats, Lewis, but he hasn't had many falls this year, so for him to have 2 in a day is very peculiar indeed. But it is a case of job done for him. He has made it safely inside the top 14, which was I think a big objective coming into this section, but maybe just a little bit of concern late on with that second crash.
With those yellow flags waving, unlikely for anyone to improve behind him. You know, the mud and grass hanging from the side of his number 18 bike. Trying to get it up and running. Session's over anyway, Manu, so there's no real point trying to resume from there. Here it is, braking hard on the angle into Villa corner. Front end didn't fancy going through his first gear hairpin. Not as dramatic or as painful as the crash he had earlier on today. But up to the Manu Gonzalez confidence. 2 falls for him as his chief title chaser behind him pops Friday here at Phillip Island.
That is just perfect for Moreira, isn't it? Just a little bit more pressure on the shoulders of this rider, I'm sure, when he looks at the timings at the end of today. He sees Moreira up there. Moreira is doing this on a Friday, so that does bode very well, you would say, for the Brazilian through the rest of this weekend. Yes, he did get a really good tow from Jake Dixon to achieve that fastest time in that new lap record. Agius, by contrast, was doing all of his lap times by himself and probably looked a good deal more consistent than the Australian, but Moreira very well placed at the end of play.
There was Darren Binder, who has booked his place into qualifying 2. He did dodge or find a gap in the yellow flags on that final lap to set the 9th fastest time, a 1:30.818. Ricardo update for you, by the way. He did set a personal best on his last lap of 1:31.5, only enough for 21st place. So prize names outside the top 14. We've got Albert Arenas, 8th in the World Championship, out of qualifying 2. Also got Joe Roberts, a winner earlier this season, down in 20th place. Holgado, 6th in the World Championship, down in P21. Lopez and Vietti for Speed RS, winner of 2 of the last 3 Grand Prix here, that team. 23rd and 26th for them. A mitigated disaster for Luca Boscoscoro and company.
Yeah, but if you're an Australian fan and you're not on Phillip Island currently. You'll want to get yourself down here for Sunday's races, because Senna Agius, what we've seen in this session in practice, is going to be up there potentially fighting for victory. From what we can see, it is still a very early point in the weekend, but Agius, his rhythm is probably the best of the entire Moto2 field from what we've seen today, and he has the speed to go with it.
He's not short of mates here in Phillip Island, is Senna Agius, but might be the best friend of his teammate Manu Gonzalez this weekend, because Manu might be relying on Senna heavily to take some big points away from Diogo Moreira here.
Yeah, we have all of the Chief Championship protagonists up there inside the top 7, with Gonzalez 5th, Canet in 7th. We see them all battling amongst each other on Sunday. That is the hope, but Diogo Moreira is top of the pile at the end of practice here on Friday.
A 1:30.307. Many millions of years ago that would have been a very fast MotoGP time around Phillip Island. It's the fastest ever Moto2 lap of this circuit from Moreira to edge out Senna Agius. David Alonso, who led early on, 3rd from Jake Dixon, this morning's pace setter, and Manu Gonzalez, despite a crash in each session, he is through in 5th. Mario Anchi, a fine 6th, ahead of Canet, Arbolino, Binder and Bayer. That's Binder's first Q2 visit since Qatar. Munoz 11th, ahead of Barry Baltus, Ethan Guevara, who rescued 13th at the end. The UBC Saki taking the last automatic place into Q2. Danny Holdado, after his early crash, did rejoin the session, but only got the 5 laps in. He's perhaps the biggest name outside the top 14. The current leading rookie in Moto2 down in P21. But in number 10, Diogo Moreira, who's MotoGP bound, could he be bound too for the Moto2 World Championship on a day where the title leader crashed twice? Diogo Moreira took full advantage. He tops day 1 here at Phillip Island. MotoGP practice is on the way.
Shelter Bay, dramatic cliffs and a haven for wildlife. MotoGP is ready for revs up, down, under in the spectacular Phillip Island. Perched overlooking the Service Paradise of the Bass Strait to 125 kilometres south of the Sportman City of Melbourne. Phillip Island is one of MotoGP's most iconic tracks and first hosted the Australian Grand Prix back in 1989. Q2 place on the line next live. It's time for MotoGP. Well, this wonderful, fast and flowing Phillip Island circuit, first built all the way back in 1956. Track this is top speeds close to 360 kilometres an hour down the 900-metre start-finish straight, named in honour of our first ever Australian Grand Prix winner here. Wayne Gardner, of course, 1987 world champion. Stoner corner, turn 3. Spectacular parts of this 12-corner layout, measuring just under 4.5 kilometres in length. And then you've got to be careful managing that rear tyre on the left-hand side through turn 12 to complete a scintillating lap. Good afternoon and welcome back to Australia. Welcome back to Phillip Island. Thankfully, it's welcome back to what are rather blustery conditions at the moment, but dry. After some forecasts were predicting maybe a little bit of rain to disrupt day 1 proceedings here in the Grand Prix of Australia. That wind's expected to pick up throughout the course of this 19th round of 22. Potentially the strongest on Sunday morning. Keeping a very close eye on the weather forecast to see what the elements lie in store over the remainder of the weekend. Weekend for the home crowd hero and a weekend for the home fans that has started off in the best possible fashion. Prima Pramac Yamaha rider Jack Miller The Aussie leading the way at the end of FP1 this morning in the dry conditions. He did switch over to fresh rubber to find a 128.281. Miller, the only rider in the top 10 that did go on to fresh tyres at the end of that session. He did warm the hearts of some rather windswept and chilly Australian fans here. It's a spectacular venue. We've got island hopping, haven't we? From the island of Lombok in Indonesia to Phillip Island. Confirmation on your screens, Jack Miller. First time the Aussie has led a practice session in MotoGP since the French Grand Prix at Le Mans, all the way back in 2023, 2.5 years ago. He led the Spaniards of Alex Marquez, Pedro Acosta, and our newest MotoGP winner, Fermin Aldeguer. Fabio Quartararo was the second of two Yamahas inside the top 5 this morning in fifth, ahead of Bezzecchi, who has a double